I think we should start out by just commending all three universities and Dr. Ing for what's happened in the last year or two. I mean, this was a concept that a lot of people didn't even think about not that long ago. If everybody from all three universities and Dr. Ing would stand, let's give them a great ovation for what they've done today. Well, as Dr. Ing said, Dave and I are consultants, and there's a lot of them here in the room today, and mostly we do feed yards. Along the way, you get a chance to do some cow-calf work. So I think we've kind of learned by trial and error to some degree and had some successes and learned a few things. When Dr. Ing made his opening comments, he talked about two things that really stuck out to me for limit feeding. One is necessity, and the other is opportunity. And if you go back 20, 25 years, most of what we did was necessity. Droughts, people running out of grass, feed. How can we not sell our cows? And so we did some of that, and I think it worked pretty well with the limited experience and knowledge we had. I would tell over the last 5, 6 years, it's gone more towards opportunity. Things like developing dairy heifers and beef heifers, export situations, certainly more recently some confined cow feeding. And so there's things that pop up you don't expect, and I guess the more that you do, the more you learn. And I think the thing that stood out to me today is how much we don't know. I mean, I think all three universities did a great job of pointing out the basics of where the challenges are, where the opportunities are. And I guess with that, I'm just going to pass it on to Dave, and whatever questions I can answer, we'll try to do.
Again, I would like to echo Bill's sentiment. Dr. Ing threw this idea at a small group of us that he refers to as the Camelot Group 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm not going to speak for the whole group, but some of us tried to discourage him. Said, that's a bad idea. That won't go anywhere, and obviously it's gone a lot of places. For the last 24 years, and incidentally, when you become Kenny's friend, your value and your status in this industry elevates, at least in his mind. So don't pay any attention to the reference he gave Bill and I. Last 24 years, we've done a yearly client meeting, someplace in the summertime. We've moved it all over. We've been to Canada. This last summer, we were in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Husband and wife thing, kind of an education, recreation, keep up with the industry sort of thing. My job has basically been to find the funding and put the program together, and a lot of you in this room have participated in that. Some of my clients are here. Dave Hutchison has been used repeatedly. Kenny has been used repeatedly. Some of you university folks, Gordon Karstens was with us a couple of years ago. But anyway, my function as that meeting progresses is to obviously pay attention and then kind of come up at the end of each presentation and try to give the people some take-homes, things that I thought were important out of what was said. And these are sort of random thoughts. I stayed up a little while last night and got up early this morning and made a few more notes today. And they're in no particular order because I make a note and I leave 2 or 3 lines and I make a note and then I might jump back in if something that relates to that first one came out of a later presentation. So, I'm going to ramble a bit, but these are the things that I've seen the last 2 days in these meetings. First of all, the idea that we're a differentiated industry really came across. I sat there and sometimes listened to these cow researchers and thought, I guess I knew that once, but I really hadn't thought about that in a long time. We tend to get blinders on and we zero in on our own little piece of the world. Some of the questions that were asked, the gentleman from Mississippi, the gentleman from Iowa, those are pertinent questions that if you practice primarily in Nebraska and Kansas and Colorado, you don't get those compaction questions, or you don't get them to the same degree. So I think the important thing that was talked about by all of the speakers is this concept of a systems approach to what we're doing. What works in Nebraska with all the hay or all the corn stock roughage that we have certainly doesn't work in Oklahoma. We just had that illustrated to us. Doesn't work in Texas. But the idea, the systems approach to finding a solution to keeping these cows, to possibly running more cows, certainly is applicable. So big picture thinking, planning, and then the implementation. Kenny mentioned this, and every time I talk to Kenny in depth about anything in our industry, a client I have that's contemplating a major change in his operation, one of the questions Kenny always asks very early is, what's your exit strategy? Can you get out of this thing with your hide intact? So as you do this planning, if you're a consultant or if you're an educator, an extension person, be sure and work with the people you're talking to. If you're a producer, that's got to be one of the things in your mind is an exit strategy. It became obvious yesterday, particularly as the discussions went on, as questions were asked, you have to tailor whatever the program is to fit your particular facility. I'll show you a bias, and I think a lot of people in this room share my bias. They're maybe not as vocal about it, but that's, those of you that know me, that's sort of me. I'm going to tell you what I think. You get up in the morning, you put a hat on, figuratively or actually. That hat either says farmer or it says cattleman. And if your total concern is compaction, you're wearing that farmer hat really, really well. That may not be the best plan for your enterprise. You maybe need to kind of take that farmer out of caps and put a slash behind it and put farmer cattleman or farmer feeder. Personally, I love feeder farmers. That's my customer group. Guys who have a passion for livestock and they farm and we make everything fit. They're darn good farmers, but cattle come first. Intensification was a word that came up yesterday, and I thought that was great. We've all wrestled with this confined cow idea as these regional differences surfaced yesterday in the discussion. It became obvious that, that maybe that wasn't the best term, but intensification, I think, is a good term. Calories as currency. That one's, I'm going to drive a few miles and think about that one. We get a lot of windshield time as consultants, and we learn to use that and use it positively. Just an aside, I've been in several meetings this year. Obviously, we've had some major technology poobahs in the last month or 6 weeks. As an industry, we need to learn to tell our story a lot better than we do. I would encourage all of you, there's a real easy read book, reads from the front, reads from the back. It's called No More Food Fights. One side says farm side, the other side says feed side. You flip it over upside down and read it. You get a viewpoint from a producer side coming from one direction. You get the viewpoint of the end consumer coming the other direction. The gal's name escapes me, but it's a simple read and it's a really good read. Hutch has got one. Maybe he can tell you who wrote it, but I would encourage you to get a hold of that. I would encourage you to, as you work with your people, as you take these ideas, you go back to your clientele or you go back to your operation, use all 6 of your senses. And maybe the most important one of those is some of the stuff that we just saw with the hay feeders. We sat there, I think, and I don't think you're any different than I am. I looked at that skirt and went, duh. It's sort of common sense. That's bound to cut waste. That's the taste, touch, feel, smell, whatever. But common sense is one of those that we oftentimes forget. Employ the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Read everything you can get your hands on. If you don't get all these industry periodicals and publications, yeah, they tend to pile up on your desk or on the table next to your chair where you read or whatever. But get them anyway. Get on the mailing list. Get them. At least scan them. If you get Beef Magazine, most of the stuff that Terry Kloffenstein presented was in a really good, easy to read article. And those things generate some thought. We need to stay current. We need to walk into every situation where we're meeting with a group of cattle people or another cattleman or a client or whatever, prepared to discuss some of these things. And the last thing, and I think it was brought out very well this morning, technology is a big deal. We've kind of taken the mantle that, yeah, the American farmer can feed the world, in spite of some of the green folks and whatnot who are trying their darndest to slow us down or to keep us from making that happen, but we can't do it without technology. And we've got to kind of get our hackles up and do it politically correctly, but we've got to support technology that's good science and been proven.
I'll make one comment in between here, but we've been able to get along pretty good with our limit-fed systems and be pretty successful. I think the real hard job maybe is to my right, and that's calving and animal health and some of those things when you get those cows in confinement for some time. So, Dee, how's that for a setup?
Oh, wonderful. It's always the vet's fault.
It is. That's what
Unless you're talking to a vet.
You'll have a slide in here at the end.
No.
Blame it all on Nutritionist, so just be prepared.
I'm not certain how much. I'm not certain if Dr. Smith covered any specific vaccination information yesterday, so you may get two views of the same thing. We were working cattle yesterday. I'm located at the U.S. McDonald Research Center. I work for the University of Nebraska. The University of Nebraska has a teaching center located there. There's approximately 1,000 animals at the U.S. McDonald Research Center, which provides wonderful opportunities for fourth-year veterinary students to get some hands-on experience they can't get anyplace else. There's about 7,000 mama cows and all their babies, a little better than 3,000 ewes and all their babies, and there's a whole bunch of hogs behind a chain link fence. And 22 years ago when I went over there, they made me take a bath, and I've not gone back. You got to take a bath when you leave pigs, not when you go to see them. At any rate, yesterday we were weaning calves. We weaned about 500 calves and worked about 200 cattle through the chute yesterday afternoon, working on some of their science research projects. There are 3 of us there that do clinical, put our hands on cows. And I guess maybe we may have a 4th. Dr. Grolution is my new boss, and I think he knows how to work around a cow, and if he does, then he'll be a 4th one. So, anyway, I wasn't here yesterday to know what Dr. Smith said. I tell my students that this is where the game is. And I think, thinking about this meeting, this is where the game is for anybody who wants to intensify their cow stuff. The best way to deal with infection is to dilute it. It's the same way you dilute toxicities that are in feed. We're going to be talking about aflatoxins or molds in feeds, I don't know, whatever. Dilutions, when you run into a problem with a feedstuff, nitrates or whatever, you dilute your way out of it. And we've done that for years. Sandhills of Nebraska, if you take if it takes 15, 20 acres to run a cow, you've diluted that pathogen a lot. Not that you necessarily dilute evenly across the deal. But this is where the game is. You have an animal, and in your case, I suspect that you're pretty nervous. Everybody's pretty nervous about calves. You intensify that, you're going to have sick calves, skyring, pneumonias, on and on and on. I had one of the biggest lessons I learned in my life when I came to the U.S. McDonald Research Center. I'm a feedlot guy. Born and raised on a small cow-calf operation, but it was just big enough to starve to death. In central Oklahoma. Go Pokes. I came to the research center thinking that I really don't care what you do to your calves. But from the time you wean them, please don't touch them until they get to my feed yard. I don't want them in anybody's chute. I don't want them in the auction market's chute. I don't want the vet down there, I get them as fast and efficiently as you can from my father's operation to my feedlot. And I don't care what you do in the cow herd. And I was so phenomenally wrong about that. I still don't want them touched when they're in the auction market. Keep your hands off my calves. But I have come to appreciate at the Meat Animal Research Center, working with lots of veterinarians in Nebraska. I work with a lot. I've learned a lot more from the Nebraska veterinarians than I have from the research scientists, and they are brilliant. I have learned a ton from them. Is that the most important thing in having a healthy calf in the feedlot at the Meat Animal Research Center, which is about 6,000, 6,500 head feedlot, is for that calf to be born to a healthy mother. That's not an opinion. That's what the data says. And we've looked at it from colostrum intake. They've looked at it from we have. Colostrum intake from illness records, whether it be scours, be it respiratory disease, be it foot rot. Somebody in this room, Gary Tibbetts, went through all of our stuff. There's an absolute correlation to how much freaking foot rot you have in a feedlot as it relates to the start that calf got in its life. And how foot rot in a feedlot associates with the first 24 hours of a calf's life escapes me, but in God's world it is connected. So this is horribly important. I have an animal in an environment, and there's an agent that's going to give me a bad time, be it E. coli, be it IBR, be it whatever. The resistance is something I can deal with, but it starts with mom. The colostrum in the first hours of life, I was told in vet school, if you get it in the first 25, you're good. Well, that was bullshit. If you don't get it in the first few hours of life, you're in trouble. That is an absolute ticking. That's a clock you cannot miss. When I came, we had to help a cow with a dystocia. We tried to mother them up for 24 hours. The next morning, they didn't look like they'd mothered up. We'd gather the calf, milk the cow, put some stuff in it. That was wrong. We should have done milking the very first moments that calf was alive. And physically put it in the calf, not leave anything to chance. If we have to assist, I'm not suggesting you ought to gather all your cows up, but if you're there, how many of you have used a calf jack? Yeah. How many are veterinarians? Yeah. There's a couple of you, right? So lots of us have experience using calf jacks that aren't vets. If you hang up, let me just tell you, if you put a chain on a calf's leg or a strap or whatever, and you get these two guys, or any other two people in this room, get one leg apiece, and lean back and start pulling, you will pull in the neighborhood of about 200 pounds. It's just the way it is. We've done it. We've got scales at the center. We play with students all the time. You get about 200 pounds. If you're really stout, you might get 300. And you'd be able to hold it for a couple of minutes. And then you go, that's it. I can put a calf jack on a calf, not put any tension, none of this. Just strap it up, hook it up, and let the calf jack go. And the weight of the bar on the end of that calf jack will set and hold 250 pounds, 300 pounds on that calf as long as it sits there until the cow lays down. That's before you do any of this. Do this, push down, you can hold 15, you can easily hold 1,000 pounds as long as you can drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. I really don't want you smoking in my barn. We got hay, don't want to burn the place down. But you get my point. Here's a calf that has the little joints that God put together in this one, cartilage, etc., that his very first moments in his life, he weighs 100 pounds. and we put 1,000 pounds of pressure. You weigh 200 pounds. Let's put a ton of pressure on your legs and see how well you walk 30 minutes from now. And we expect this calf to get up and mother up? How far up our head do we have? Never mind. One of these days, there'll be a loud explosion when some of us are walking down the road, and it'll be our head popping out of our, you know what I'm saying? We just don't think about that. As Dave said, common sense. So when that calf hits the ground, we need to help that calf, and that means milking that cow out. And the one thing I figured out, that cowboys love to milk cows. That they live to milk heifers. And the other thing I figured out is that heifers, they love to be milked. So it's a perfect situation. You know what I'm saying? And they give you so much milk. You can squeeze until your hand falls off, and you might get a pint bottle out of colostrum. And it's so thick you cannot pour it. You with me? You got to dilute it with some warm water to get it in that calf. But it is tiger's milk. It is spinach to Popeye. It is, you know what I'm saying? It is amazing stuff. But that's the resistance that calf gets. And everything in that calf that he's going to get with that colostrum came from having raised that cow properly from its birth. You with me? So when do you start? I start working on that mama cow the day it was born, when I got the colostrum in it. And then before I turn the bulls in for breeding, then we call that branding in some parts of Nebraska. What do we do at branding? We take their horns and their testicles. Do we give them a full complement of vaccines that those calves should get to keep them healthy when they wean them? You should. But forever we gave them blackleg. Well, that's nuts. I mean, not that they don't need blackleg, but to start preparing that immune system with IBR, BVD, PI3, BRSV is silly. Now, there's a lot of silly vaccines out there. I mean, giving a calf lepto, that's a bullshit meter, right? It's silly. There's a lot of vaccines out there that are useless, and that's maybe Histopheles somnus is a useless vaccine. There's no data to support it, but to start that calf off right, and then if we want these calves to stay healthy, pre-weaning vaccinations. I used to think 2 weeks was enough. If I can get them up 2 weeks before I put them in, not enough. They need a month. They need at least a month, 4 to 6 weeks. And what do? You do the exact same set of vaccines. I also include Mannheimia hemolytic in those vaccines. The data supports it. Data does not support the use of that vaccine in my weaned calves that I get from the auction market in my feed yard. But data does support it if I start it and get those calves well immune, that I'm going to hang on to, retained ownership, or in your case, heifers you're going to pull back into your herd. Now, deworming and fly control and all those other things are critical, as appropriate. Young animals are very, very, very susceptible to parasites. Old cows are too old and ugly for parasites. Parasites go, I'm not, who wants to infect her? You with me? They have a built-up resistance, but those calves are really important. And you need high-quality product. I have real suspicions about generic products, especially when it comes to things that are important. And a fellow by the name of Bob Hillier told me one time the beef industry is going broke, stepping over dollar bills, trying to pick up nickels. And I think that's true, especially when we try to save a few pennies on some generic, especially dewormers. I don't like pour-on dewormers, and the data says you're really playing Russian roulette with those things. High-quality stuff. So we've got a calf born to a healthy mother. The last thing to mention is there's a few tests that you need to know about your calves that are entering your cow herd. One of them is that you don't want anything entering your cow herd that hasn't been tested to be PI negative for BVD. persistently in carrier, BVD, persistently infected animals, are carriers that will jack your herd. Just don't let anything enter your herd without testing for it. Just, that's critically important. The question then for this group is, I'm going to calve these cows in an intense operation. So all these babies are going to be born, I'm going to say, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say dry lot. Pretty intense deal. Oh my God, they're all going to get sick and die. And the answer is no. No, they won't. If you've done all the stuff you need to do to your cow herd, and those cows are ready to go, I mean, those calves, in other words, we're fixing to give birth to a healthy calf, and the colostrum's good. You do need to move those cows right before calving to a clean calving area. But that doesn't have to be a pasture. And as soon as those calves are born, I mean, some of the feedlots I've been in, some of the soil surfaces that I have in feedlots are cleaner than some of your pastures, some of the calving pastures I've been in. But I want my feedlots to be cleaned at least every month. I want those pens, a scraper go across those at least every month and pile them. I don't want this to be a pit of disease. I do it for dust control. I do it for mud control. But if you're calving cows in there, what would be the problem in running a scraper over that calving area once a week? So those calves are hitting in something clean. And then keep those calves grouped by age. I'd probably use a little bedding, but I don't know what the data looks like on that. Don't know if there is any data, but I would likely use some. But I honestly believe that if I have these calves prepared properly in utero through healthy mothers, that I can get that calf born in an intense operation. Works. And don't worry about keeping them. Another thing that was on Dave's list that he told me personally was, what about when do you wean them? Who cares? We've weaned tons and tons of cattle in Nebraska at 3 and 4 months, and they just do great. Early weaning is a money-making deal if you need to save the grass. An animal unit, by definition, is 1,000 pounds of cow. If she's got a calf by side, that's a third of an animal unit. And if you can take a third of that grazing pressure off your stuff and protect the carbohydrates and root systems in those plants, you need to do it if the climate dictates. But early weaned calves, everything we've done and know is that there's not a health risk in early weaned calves if you got this in perspective. Thanks.
Any questions for, I think, for anybody? Any of the speakers, any of the department heads? Now's your chance. We've got a lot of them corralled up here. And are any comments, any suggestions?
I know there are Landco people in the audience, and I would just make one comment. The presentation that shows all the rumensin data in cows, if you looked at the dates on that data, it's old. And, universities are looking for help with these kinds of projects. To redo some of this would make good sense to me. The animal has changed, our feedstuffs have changed, a lot of things have changed that would warrant another look at that kind of technology.